Hi, everybody, and let me screen share here. All right, so we're here today with Julie Kothlow, and I'm very excited to invite Julie onto the program today and talk about women and power and get her views and her experience on dealing with issues of power in her career as a woman leader. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today and talk to you about this subject. It was very thought-provoking when you asked me, so yeah, it's going to be fun.
Okay, great. So we'd love to kick off with a couple of questions that we're asking a lot of our women leaders, and wondering about your experience with power in your career. When did you first encounter it?
I think it was when I was first manager, and I wasn't quite sure what that meant. I thought, oh, great, now I have a bunch of staff. What do I do? And I didn't really have anyone to sort of help mentor or coach me along the way. And so I did what I thought just came naturally, which was to really think about what I could do to bring out the best in the people that I worked with. And so it wasn't so much the traditional view of what people might think power is. It isn't the command and control. And for me, it was all about influencing how I can share my knowledge and how I can help them be the best they can be.
Great, thank you. It seems like for many of us, we kind of found our way with power. It's a topic that we're talking about a lot now, but in the past, it wasn't something we talked about so much. So I'm curious, based on what you've just shared with us and in your experience and in your first exposure as a manager with power, how do you define power today?
You know what, it's probably not that different. And, you know, as I mentioned, I had a difficult time, I have to admit, with the word power. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure a lot of women do, that perhaps in some ways it comes up with some negative connotations about controlling others and having power over other people. And so for me, I think it's when you start to see people who are taking what you're sharing, so if it's knowledge, and they start to adapt it or adopt it and are taking it and making it their own, and you realize, or I've realized, that the power for me comes in seeing when others are excelling, and that I had a role in doing that. And that's when, for me, I go, wow, what a privilege that is.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I really hear, as you talked about earlier, about influencing change and really how powerful to be able to have an impact on someone else's life and career, and really even empower them and change things that way. Yeah. I agree with you. I think a lot of us women have had conflicting relationships with power because of how perhaps we've seen it utilized in the past, and that older notion of power over, as you say, the dominating yes. kind of use of power. Yeah, wonderful. So what can you tell us about what you've done to develop your own personal power? What were some of those key moments where you found yourself developing your personal power?
I think part of it is practicing gratitude and being curious and not looking at it as an opportunity for myself to grow as well. I've had many mentors and others who have influenced me, and as I gain more knowledge and as I'm able to share more, it's really important that it just doesn't dwell with me, that there's an opportunity to use that power or influence to help others as well. And I'd say I'm a student of behavior and change anyway, and what motivates people to grow, to do things differently, to change. And each client I work with also teaches me. You know, I've worked in environments where there's not a lot of rules, there's not a lot of standards, there's not a lot of structure. And really, at the end of the day, influence is all you have to make things happen. And that's been a learning and a gift, I would say, that I get from my clients. So I get to flex with them and grow with them and figure out what works in their environment, what's going to help to motivate them, to mentor them, to support them. And when I start to see them coming to me and asking me about advice or how to do something, that's when I feel powerful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it sounds like that sense of power lives somewhat in the area of value, valuing expertise, perhaps valuing the knowledge and the you mentioned change as well, being a change agent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you mentioned the word influence.
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, you mentioned the word influence, and I was curious about what do you find is key to your ability to use influence as part of that notion of power, being powerful, empowering others. What do you find is key in being able to influence?
You know, there is a book that I came upon a couple of years ago that has resonated with me, and I pretty much embedded it in my practice. And it's called Influencer, and I actually teach it as well. And, you know, it says that there are two things that create a change, and one is motivation, and the other one's ability. So, you know, ability is all about training, giving people the skills and the tools to be able to do things differently or change. And the tricky bit is always around the motivation. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we think we just tell people what to do, you know, or have that power over them that they'll just go ahead and do that. And we know, of course, that's not true. And so when we look at motivation, my job as a leader or as a consultant is really to help them find the motivation within themselves to do something different or do it in a different way. And that can come from themselves, it can come from their social networks, and it can also come from the environment around them and how you set that up. So all those things have a way of influencing a change or a direction. And that approach, I've used it to overlay change methods. I've used it to align organizations to strategy. So it's been a very powerful tool for me.
Great. I love it. I love it. And I totally agree with you. I think influence is one of the major power tools that any person, any woman would be benefited to have in their toolbox. And you mentioned the book, and I have it on my shelf somewhere, and I'm wondering if it's the same book. Is this the one? Yeah. Yeah, it's The Power to Change Anything. It is from the Carrie Patterson and Joseph Grenny. These are the people that are the Vital Smarts crew. And they have Crucial Conversations and a bunch of other books that are fantastic. So wonderful. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's so
I certainly viewers to go and have a look, because they've got amazing newsletters with all sorts of situations that, you know, I find for leaders and whatnot that is hugely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for that shout out on that book too. It's a great one. Now you talked about having some mentors, and so this is kind of a parallel question in terms of who were your role models and why. Perhaps they were mentors as well. Who really inspired you and set you off in this path yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it happened very early in my career, and I had gone to university and had student loans. And when I finished, I thought, you know what, I need a break. I was going to go on to architectural school and thought, I just need to make some money and pay off those loans. And my first job was with an incredible entrepreneur who let me do all sorts of things I wasn't qualified for. And he really was my first mentor in so many ways. And so it really helped me build my confidence. And, you know, he really did help me find that motivation and give me some of those skills. And you know, he never sat down with me and trained me and, you know, said, here's what you need to do. He really gave me free rein to do that. And somehow intuitively, he knew that that's the way I learned. Mm-hmm. I learned by doing. So, you know, he was very intuitive, I think. So I think that's really where it first started.
Fabulous.
And I never turned back. I never went back into architectural school because I was so intrigued.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, what a gift to be able to learn that at a young age and to have someone who obviously believed in you. And yes. I hear also, I wonder if you learned the power to fail, the power to try things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that's something that we often don't learn, is that failing is part of life. It's part of learning, and it's the feedback we get from failure, the mistakes, and it's such an F word, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point around feedback too, and you know, I certainly see that when people have been given good feedback, good constructive feedback, their opportunity to grow and excel is that much more. And I don't think that we put as much value on that as we should. And, you know, whether it's positive or negative, it's really an opportunity for those who are receiving it to grow. Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Great. What do you think about managing other people's expectations of you as a woman, for example? How do you manage those expectations that others might have had or do have of you? Around being a woman leader.
It was an interesting, I was thinking about that and thinking, I probably don't do as good a job at that. You know, it was probably only 2 years ago when someone said to me that, you know, you try and set expectations with others, but it's really hard to say no. That you want to be perceived as the one that can be supportive and helpful. And someone had said to me, well, when you say no, you're actually saying yes to something else, and figure out what that yes is. And that really made a difference for me, because I was no longer feeling like, you know, I wasn't being that supportive person, or I wasn't going the extra mile for someone. And it made me feel better about setting those boundaries and expectations while still being helpful and supportive, because there was usually something else I could do to help.
Right. Great. What great advice too. And such an integral thing to learn. The power to say no is the empowering yes behind it that comes forward. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's well put. Yeah,
that's wonderful, wonderful. So also, then I'm curious. Then what do you think about when do you think women are most at risk of being perceived? We had this whole bossy thing that came out in the last year or so. I'm not bossy, I'm a leader. And the whole counter to the our societies, sometimes our own internal compass that tells us that we shouldn't be too overbearing as women, that often and we saw Hillary get slammed with that several times during the election as well. But when do you think women might be at risk of being perceived that way? And what have you done to overcome that, or what might you do?
Yeah. I think it's also the difference between men and women. And women tend to be more open, transparent, and state how we feel. And in some ways call a spade a spade. Mm. And I think that can be perceived as overbearing, that we're sharing too much. Mm. And so I think that sometimes can be risky. And I had heard something, I guess it was about a month ago, where I'd heard someone say, well, around the boardroom table, we go around, and some of our male counterpoints, when they're asked, how are things going, will go, oh, no, everything's fine. Yep. And then they'll go away and address whatever problems or issues they might have. And then one of the women executives might say, well, we have issues here and problems there. Mm. And the way it's perceived is, wow, women have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So it isn't that they have any more than anyone else, but because of our transparency and wanting to share not only what we see, but what we feel and what's going on, that can sometimes be perceived as too much or overbearing. And I guess it was at a talk I saw by Tina Nuno from Gardner Group.
Right.
And she had said, I don't know if you saw the same
I was there.
She said, yeah, so she had also mentioned that somebody had said, oh, you're being emotional or too emotional. And she said, actually, let me help you out. This emotion is angry, and here's what I'm angry about. And I love that. Yeah. So she kind of acknowledged that, yes, it is, and just in case you didn't know. Yeah. So I think, again, that can be perceived as being overbearing.
I love that. I love your
oversharing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you shared that she said about that, because it's just naming it, and when we label something or name it, we often take the steam or the pressure out of it, and it just dissipates. Yes. So what a great approach! It sounds like a good tool to have.
Yeah, well put.
So as we move into sort of our final question, thinking about what advice would you give to women about how to cultivate their power? Looking back, if you were even to think of yourself as a 20-something-year-old graduating with, trying to make decisions around architecture or not architecture, what advice would you want to give your younger self or to younger women today? All women, actually.
Yeah, I think there's two things. The first one is on confidence. And even if you're not particularly feeling confident inside, is to practice giving the impression when you don't particularly feel it, but also getting to the point where you do feel it. And part of that is really knowing your subject matter and feeling good about who you are, so that inner confidence will take you miles. And the second thing I would say is authenticity. And I think sometimes as women, we feel we have to behave in a certain way. And I think the more authentic we are at work, the easier it will be. And there was a couple of ladies who I met that were the first vice presidents in their business, which happened to be insurance, and it was for a very large global organization. So they were the first female vice presidents out of Toronto. And these women were amazing. I mean, they were funny as all get out. And they said, you know, in their office that, you know, the members on the floor were always running over because there'd be, you know, big bouts of laughter coming out of their offices. And she said, you know, I looked around and some of the younger females, you know, weren't really sure what to do with this. Like, oh my goodness, you know, I have to be very professional and so on and so forth. And she said, you know, it's actually gotten contagious, and now it's changed the culture, and it's become a more fun workplace. So when you see the younger generation coming in and thinking, oh my goodness, I have to be, you know, quiet and professional and reserved, it's wonderful that they now have that role model who made it to the VP level and are being themselves and having fun doing it. So I think as more experienced and mature women leaders, we owe it to the workplace and those that we work around to bring our own authenticity to work.
Lovely, lovely. Love that. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie. I love that image that you've left us with of the VPs and the laughter and the fun that we can have in our workplaces, and the call out to all of us to be our authentic selves, and that how powerful that can be. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. I really enjoyed our conversation and really appreciate you inviting me.
Well, you're quite welcome. And Evelyn and I love to see you out with the horses soon, and we'll circle back around on our topic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, we'll definitely be there. Thank you, Carrie.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.